Aloha, it's Katie, and we are back to talk about my college interview experiences and every single question I was asked. This is actually the second video. If you haven't already seen the first video, I talked about my interviews for Stanford, Yale, and UPenn, so make sure to watch that video first if you haven't already seen it. But in this video, we're just going to talk about the remaining schools I applied to, so Harvard, Cornell, Columbia, and Princeton. If you're wondering about the results I got, I'll pop them on screen. Long story short, I got waitlisted for most of them. I did a lot more videos though about the college admissions process for me, especially as an international student. Make sure to check out that playlist down below called How to Get Into Your Dream College. I even interview my friends who got into other top universities, and they break down every single part of their application. It's like Reddit, but in video form. And while you're down there, you should subscribe because I do a lot more college videos that I think you will find very helpful. Let's get started. So, Columbia. This was my most formal interview by far. They were conducting mass interviews, so I was like put in a room one-on-one with the interviewer, and he had like a timer, and he had a very kind of like fixed set of questions he already had like in front of him on a paper, and you can just imagine me like just trying to look and be like, what's on the paper? So the first question he asked was, tell me about yourself and your interests. This, guys, is a very, very common starter question. I did a video all about the top 5 questions you will get in college interviews, as well as how to answer them, because you should definitely prepare and have some pitch about yourself. For me, I talked about, first of all, why I want to study abroad, because I think that's something super important to mention as an international student, for me at least. And I also talked about my YouTube channel, my activities in school, from the 2 varsity sports I played, volleyball and badminton, and also the clubs I was part of and had leadership positions in. Next, he asked me, tell me about your YouTube channel. One thing you'll find is that these interviews are really personalized to you, and oftentimes it will take the shape of whatever answer you supply. So you should ask yourself before the interview, what do you want to talk about? And these things you should definitely mention, because they will go deep and ask you about it. So for me, they asked, tell me about your YouTube channel. They asked, do you have haters? Which is always a fun question, because of course I have haters. I've done 3 videos where I responded to hate comments because I was low-key a savage, and still am, but we've toned it down a bit. I think I mentioned somewhere that I had my lowest point in 8th grade in middle school, so then he asked me, how did your YouTube channel help you cope with that? And then he asked, what is an example of one thing you wanted to share but you weren't allowed to? And I think this is because I talked about my struggle with my parents and how they didn't support my YouTube channel. Actually, they didn't know about my YouTube channel when I started it, because I was pretty sure they were not gonna let me. Then he asked, what else do you make videos on? He asked, how did you change from that award or grade mindset to personal growth? This, again, I talked about in my previous video, but I mentioned how important mindset was for me to really do better in school, because in middle school, I was just like an average student getting B's, and then in high school, that was really when I turned around and then got straight A's, and then eventually became my class valedictorian. But it was quite a journey for me, and it took me changing my relationship from, all the pressures I was facing from myself, from my parents, from my school, to just like remembering why I love learning. Then he started asking me about my siblings, my age gap between them. Then tell me about computer science. Does it connect with your interest with graphic design? And then tell me briefly about your interest in business and economics, because I, for some schools, did apply as a double major for computer science and economics. And he asked me, how do you see these 2 fields linking? And then for the next half of the interview, he asked me really specific Columbia questions. Prior to this interview, I had prepared for every single interview why I chose that school, like specific programs ready. But this was the first interview where like he really dug deep into it, and I was so grateful that I prepared. So he asked me, first of all, why Columbia? What draws you to Columbia? Why do you think it's a good fit? And then he asked, what traditions have you heard of? Have you visited Columbia? What about academic life at Columbia draws you to it? Are there any clubs you're interested in? And then after that, there were just final general behavioral interview questions like, how do you deal with conflict? And when have you been pushed? And then finally, how do you see yourself contributing to the community at Columbia? Something very important to think about, because at the end of the day, when interviewers are talking to you, when your admissions officers are reading your application, they want to see that you will succeed in that campus and you will ultimately bring glory to the university name. Honestly, that is like a big factor that, admissions officers look at. It's like when they see you on paper, they want to know, is this kid gonna go far? Can this school help give them the resources to reach that potential and ultimately become a proud alumni who will donate lots of back to the school, it's definitely there, just so you know. Next interview was my Cornell interview. And because I am now a Cornell student, I think a lot of you will have many expectations for how this went. Honestly, I don't think it was a game changer. A lot of people say interviews as a component of your application are really there to really just help you. And oftentimes, you know, your interviewers are people from your own country or your own district, and they will want to see more students from their area go to their alma mater. So this interview was actually very, very chill for me. He asked me 3 questions. First was why Cornell? Why computer science, and what do you hope to do with your education? The rest of the interview was very chill. It was actually more just me getting to know him and his experience at Cornell. So this was definitely the most chill interview I had. It didn't even feel like an interview. So actually, maybe that's why it went well. He treated me like we were just friends talking about the good old Cornell days that, you know, at that point I never experienced yet. I learned a lot about Cornell through this interview, like how Cornell really emphasizes giving back to the community, and it's a very service-oriented school. Also, I actually am close to my interviewer now because I go to Cornell now, so I know him and he's super cool. Next was my Princeton interview. He also started with, tell me about yourself. What makes you different and stand out? I hate this question so much. Like, I really hate when, you know, people ask me to tell them why I stand out. I don't know. This is like my very, I guess, optimistic side, but it's like, I don't want to be pit against other people. I really believe in this abundance mindset where many people can succeed together, where if more people collaborate and help each other, you know, succeed, it creates synergies, and the rising tide lifts all boats is my personal motto. So I really just like don't like having to talk about why I think I'm better than other candidates, because I don't think that. I really think it's about fit for the school. Anyways, after I dreadfully answered that question, he talked about my YouTube, and then he asked me, you know, did you do it for the clout basically, or did you do it because you actually liked making videos, which, you know, is a no-brainer for me. It's obviously the latter. And then he asked me, do you earn money? And I said yes, and he said, tell me more. He asked me if I earlied the school, which I honestly don't know if that is allowed. Like, anyways, I obviously said no because I earlied Stanford and I got deferred. Then he said, walk me through your Common App essay, walk me through your Princeton essay, what issues do you want to solve and how, what do you want to do with computer science and economics, like what's the end goal, where do you see yourself in 10 years? I also really don't like this question. Come on, you guys know from COVID, like, we don't even know what the heck is gonna happen in the next 10 months, so how do I know what's gonna happen in the next 10 years? What was your predicted score for IB, because I did the IB diploma program? And then, do you have any major updates or things to include, which I really appreciated because this interview happened after I submitted the application in regular decision round, so he was basically asking if I wanted to fill in anything that he could mention in the interview to supplement my application. My last interview was my Harvard interview. This is so funny. In my notes, I wrote this guy was like such a bae. Back when bae was, you know, the word. But he was actually a very recent graduate. He was also this white guy, by the way, in the Philippines, which was my first experience because most of my other interviews were Filipino. And he was also really nice about saying that it's gonna be a chill conversation so I can relax. I don't know if he could tell I was nervous, probably, but I had a very positive experience, as you can see with this interview. Okay, so questions. First one, tell me about yourself. Second, what do you make videos on? How did you get into YouTube? How did you find motivation in your studies? Like, did you dive into your textbook or did you have a moment? He asked me what studies I was interested in. And then, this is really interesting, he was like, a lot of computer science people do it for the money or finance salaries. Do you think that'll be a temptation? And it's funny, like, in retrospect, I can really, really see this culture in a lot of Ivy League and other very selective universities. Pre-professional culture is a huge defining trait of these universities, and it's very intense. Like, everyone is just like out there interviewing, up in their resume, you know, really trying to get those jobs. So I totally understand why he asked. I'm pretty sure I said no, and I'm happy that 3 years later, because I'm a third-year university student now, I haven't been tempted. Or if I have, I didn't let the temptation get to me because I did not end up applying to any big tech companies this year as I had originally planned. Why study abroad and at Harvard specifically? What awards do you have? And congratulations. I think I'd mentioned that I had gotten the Harvard Prize Book Award, which is given to one student from the Harvard Club of the Philippines every year. So I was the national recipient, if I'm not mistaken. He said there were similarities about international schools and studying abroad. What about it do you like or hope to continue abroad? And for context, because I studied at an international school, and that's one reason that got me interested in continuing my education as an international student in the States. He asked, what courses are you interested in at Harvard? It's okay if you don't know. Thank God I had prepared. So this is why, guys, like, you want to prepare super specific facts about each school. Oh gosh, I think I mentioned philosophy in one of them because like I just thought the class was cool, but I think he mistook it and suddenly thought I was like this philosophy person. So then he was like, you mentioned philosophy. What do you think are ethics of computer science or that people should be mindful of? For example, algorithmic bias. Which, like, at that point I had very little exposure to. After that, we talked about theory of knowledge, which is a required course in the IB diploma program, which I think influenced why I was interested in philosophy in the first place, but it's a study of how you know what you know. Then he said, since you mentioned the idea of universal truths, what do you like about ethics, or what draws you to it? Like, why is it important? Another really deep question I didn't see coming, and at this point I was like, I was digging myself my own grave, because you know how I mentioned earlier, whatever you supply in an answer, they will use it and they will push it. So whatever you say, guys, be ready, because I accidentally dug myself a philosophy hole. Anyways, then finally we got out of that and he started talking about, what's your dream job? Is it the intersection of computer science, social media, ethics? And then he said, you mentioned you were in 2 varsity sports teams. That's a lot of commitment. What was that like? Do you participate in overseas competitions? Answer with yes. And then I think I might have talked somewhere about colonial mentality, because he's been in New Delhi before and he noticed similarities with India and British colonialism. So how do you think the Philippines looks at America and its colonialism? Ooh, another deep one, guys. You best be ready for your Harvard interview. Then he also asked me about the thoughts on the Philippine landscape with Duterte and all the country's problems. I wonder in retrospect if he was really just trying to get to know the Philippines because he was new here, so he was probably honestly using this conversation to get to know the Philippines, which I guess I am a good person to ask because I've lived here all my life, but I just totally did not expect it. Then we started to go into more chill topics like, what people do you surround yourself with? What's it like living with siblings? What's your relationship with your parents like now? What clubs or activities do you see yourself joining at Harvard? What do you think it'll be like moving away? And finally, do you plan on coming back to the Philippines or staying in the States? Those were all the questions I got. I really hope this video helped you. If it did, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to see more, share it with a friend if you think they'll find it helpful. Please, like, I really believe in supporting your peers throughout this entire university admissions process because it is stressful enough as it is. Support your friends. Also, let's keep in touch. I'm on Instagram at AlohaKatieX. I wish you the best with your interviews. Have an amazing week ahead, and I'll see you next week with another new video. Bye, guys.